Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I am talking to founder of the Only Hearts Club, Jackie Stein, and we're talking all about creating community, bringing moms together, and gathering in real life. So welcome, Jackie. But before we get into talking about creating community as mothers, can you share with us one thing that you've done today to take care of yourself?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I've done it yet, but what I do plan on doing is going for a walk a little later, trying to get in my 10,000 steps a day. And I think that's something that definitely is like a self-care thing.
Yeah, I love that. I just came back from my walk before this call.
Nice.
So you have been on the podcast before about over a year ago now, and we talked all about having only one child and your community around that. Can you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do for people who maybe haven't listened to that episode yet?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jackie, as you mentioned, and a few years ago I started something called Only Hearts Club, which is a community for mothers around the world who are mothers of one. And the reason I did it is just because I felt that, there were a lot more parenting social media accounts, like more not specific to mothers, but just more general parenting. And I feel like being a mom and especially being a mother to an only child has its own unique sets of like benefits and challenges. And so I really wanted to create a community where mothers felt seen and heard and more of that connection. So, yes, that's something that I founded. And aside from that, I'm also a communications professional. So, my work takes me to different parts of the world. I work for a really fantastic not for profit here in Canada, but we're international in scope. And so, yeah, that's what I do when I'm not running Only Hearts Club and also parenting a almost 4-year old.
And why do you think it is that mothers are craving community at this point?
I think we've always created communities. I don't think it's that we're doing it now. I think that the communities look maybe different now than they did in our mother's generation. When I've spoken to my mother about her friends that she had when she was raising myself and my sister, and one of the things she said is it was very much like it was kind of like insular, right? It was who you had in the community. It was, your friends that you had from before. But the communities, I think, were smaller and they were more connected, whereas now I find that communities tend to be broader than they were a few generations ago. I think part of that has to do with the fact that women, I'm maybe making a bit of an assumption here, but I think that there's more of a priority for taking care of yourselves, right? And building those communities and prioritizing your own wellness and your well-being. So I think communities are expanding more now. We have our friends that we had from our childhoods, if we're lucky enough to have those friends. And then we have our friends from work, and then we have our friends from, motherhood, and other things that we're doing, whatever other activities that we partake in, we build our friendships that way too. So I think it's something that communities have always been there. I think they just look slightly different now than they did maybe a few generations ago. But I do think that, that being said, they're so important, right? Because the motherhood journey is unique and it comes with all kinds of challenges, and a sense of, in some ways, kind of building a new identity, and going through that growth on your own. You're not just raising a child. I also think that you're raising yourself in the process. And I think for that reason, it's so important to have women around you and friends around you who are able to understand, what that looks like, what that journey is like, be able to relate to it and be able to support you through it, and for you to be able to do the same for your other members of your community.
And when we think about social media, you run a community on social media. How do you see that social media has influenced how we define and how we build community? Because it is quite different to what our mothers had and our parents had.
Yeah, I think social media is a really interesting community that's still, I'd say, in some ways, relatively new, right? I mean, I know we've kind of grown up with the onset of social media, and our children, of course, will be very much inundated in social media for better or for worse. But we're kind of the first generation that really has been, that's been part of our community and been part of our lives. Um, for me, social media it has its pros and its cons. I mean, again, it allows you to build this not just a community that's within, the narrow confines of your neighborhood. It allows you to expand. So you're able to meet so many interesting people in different parts of the world, in different cities in your own country. I think that there's so much opportunity to build community through social media. On the flip side, I also think that there's this sense of almost like arm's length community. I think that there's such a I think it's very underrated when we think about getting together with your friends, right? I think sometimes, we went through the pandemic as an example, and we were really separated from people. I think that's definitely when social media allowed for really like building of those communities. But I hesitate to say that social media on its own is a community. I think it's something that you can definitely build. I think it can instigate new relationships and new bonds. But I really feel so strongly about the importance of actually taking those online relationships offline and continuing to help your relationships flourish, which I think sometimes can be challenging because there's so much noise on social media as well. And there's always that sense of, where do you turn first? What kind of connections can you make? I think it is a jumping off point for building bonds and relationships, but I don't think it can be the only thing that we have as a community.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people through social media and interviewed a lot of amazing people and deepened those connections because of access there where we can connect with other people.
Yeah.
But taking that next step of meeting in real life and becoming friends, or at least having real conversations on the phone or over video helps, doesn't it? Because yeah, on social media there is just so much noise and you can know about other people's lives, but they may not even be people that you actually know, right? They're not actually friends. You just know so much about the details of some stranger across the world's life.
Yeah, and I've also, I mean, even outside of my own community, I'm also a runner, so I've made friends through the running community. And it's funny to think that I built some of these relationships and these bonds over a few years, but if I saw them on the street, like I'm not sure if I would walk by them and not recognize them. So that's like, I think that's the really interesting part of, being online is you build these relationships and they're legitimate relationships, like they're legitimate bonds, right? I feel very connected to these people. But if I saw them on the street, if I didn't know that I was, going to be meeting them, I don't know if I would recognize them or if I would walk right by them. So it's a strange dynamic, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it is. So how do we cut through that noise and that overwhelm of so many different people online to start bringing those communities and people into real life? Because you've done this, you've gotten groups together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful challenge. I will say that. I think even when you start there's also this sense of responsibility for trying to build those communities. And I'm based here in Toronto. So I recently did an event for like it was an intimate event. It was with women within the Only Hearts Club, sorry, the Only Hearts Club community. And it was beautiful. It was so nice to bring women together who I had not met before, who I only ever connected with online. And just, I think that the overall opinion of it was just that it was so great to be together in person, to have those conversations, to actually see each other face to face. It's such a beautiful thing that we would never have otherwise had the opportunity to do, even if we had done like a separate group on our social media, as an example, like an online group. So I think it's really important. I also try to do it to like extend it beyond Toronto. So I've said to people that have reached out to me through DMs, where are you based? Because they're looking for that connection, right? I mean, I've had someone who recently reached out and said, I posted a photo of my son and his best friend, who also happens to be an only, and his mother is also now one of my closest friends. And she said, I really am just waiting and I'm hoping for that day to come where my child is able to meet, their best friend who's an only as well. And I asked them where they were based, and we talked about that. And I think, one of the things that I do have the ability to do with the platform is to just see if there's other people in those communities that can be connected, right? I think I've been doing this since I come by it so naturally, where for me I'm such a connector and I'm such a networker that I really want to. It's not just about me at the end of the day. I mean, the Only Hearts Club, it's not an influencer platform, it's a community platform. And my goal at the end of the day is to help build those communities, not just in Toronto, but throughout the world, right? So if you're based in London, England, and you're looking for people to connect with, you can let me know and I will post a story, or I'll make a post to say, is there anybody else in this community? And it's growing, right? I mean, I started with like a few hundred people. And, it's very much organically growing. I don't, I get followers over time who I guess hear about it in different ways or find out about it online. But we are a growing community, and the only child community is getting, very large. I mean that there's so many more one and done families now. So I think that there's such space for a community like this. But all that to say is that I'm always very, very open, and I encourage people to reach out to me, send me a DM if you're looking to build your community, if you want to host an event, or if you just want to meet other women in a much more organic way. If you send me a message, I will post a story for you to see if there's other people in your community that you can connect with.
And what about women who want to start doing similar things to what you're doing, like having that community, but starting to, yeah, get together in real life? What can they do? Like, what would you recommend to these women that are DMing you to do?
I mean, I would say honestly, just start. Like it can feel overwhelming at times, right? Because even when I started the Only Hearts Club, I started it actually as a Facebook group in Toronto. And then eventually, I hosted an event there. And then eventually I thought, I'm such a traveler myself, and I have so many of my friends are living in different parts of the world that I've met through different things that I've done throughout my life. And I thought, I feel like this could be something bigger than just, not just, I feel like this could be something bigger than having a Facebook community that only focuses on one community. I think that this is something that people, women all over the world, will be able to appreciate and to feel that they want to engage with. So I would say the hardest part is starting it, right? It's just and building it organically, knowing that there's no such thing as really an overnight success, right? I think we just kind of see these people who are online and they have these communities that are 50, 60, 100,000 strong. And you think that that happens overnight. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it could be a viral post, where all of a sudden you have thousands of new followers. But recognizing that really what you're going for is quality over quantity. You want people that are going to be part of your community that really want to be there, that want to engage, that care about what you're doing, that care about the content that you're putting forward. So I would say those are things that, to consider is just slow and steady. Think about what type of community you're trying to build, right? Is it something around a specific interest? Is it something around a specific family dynamic? I think you kind of have to know what you're starting with and what your goals are, and then going from there and just taking it slow. And then there are other ways to do it too. It doesn't have to be on social media, right? If there are community groups in your area that you can start to build those relationships and those communities with as well, kind of those like more micro communities from like a larger community. I think that there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, so much of it does start online these days. But it's easy. I think people really are looking for connection. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the fact that, is this going to be something that no one's going to want to participate in or engage with you in? I'm pretty sure that if you're building something, people will come because there's a need for it. People are looking for that connection. I think maybe more than ever before. And I think that's also partially because, as I said before, social media can be amazing, but it can also be somewhat superficial. I think people are looking for that more in-person, personal connection where those relationships and those friendships can grow.
Do you find it's challenging to get the people who are meeting with you on social media to actually come to in-person events and meetups? Because it's really easy to stay home and be on our phones. And I think we're seeing a younger generation that's doing this. They're partying less, they're drinking less, they're dating less, they're doing all these things less. I
Yeah.
don't think it's just because they're being healthier or something. I think it's because they are on their phones and not getting out there in real life. And it does take an effort. Everything is so accessible from our fingertips. How do we actually get up the energy and coordinate our lives to get to those in-person events? It sounds ridiculous to say this, but this is the reality we live in, that I think it's challenging for people who do run retreats or workshops or get-togethers, especially with people that they don't know in real life, because that can be a bit scary for people to show up that first time. So I know I said a lot there, but like, give us some tips.
Yeah. I mean, I think so you hit the nail on the head with a few things there. But I would say that for me, it's probably mostly about it's scary to meet new people. I don't know for our generation, I think you and I are the same age, so I can speak for both of us. That I think the younger generation is very attached to their phones, and because they grew up that way, it's almost the normal for them. Whereas for us, we grew up differently. I think that there's still for the generation for our generation, for like, moms that are around our age, I think that there is that sense of going out into the community, participating in things, wanting to meet other people. But you're right. I think that there's a sense of fear, right? Around like, what if I go and have no one to speak to, or what if I go and, no one, I don't connect with anyone. I think that's a legitimate fear, but I also think that the chances of that happening are pretty slim, and I would say, even when I ran the event a couple weeks ago, the feedback I got was, wow, like I felt like I knew these women for a long time, or the conversation was so easy and seamless. I think we end up scaring ourselves more than we have to, because the chances of you going and not meeting anyone new or having a nice conversation are very, very slim. So I'd say that I wouldn't worry too much about that, and what's the worst case scenario is you go to an event and you don't meet anyone that you connect with there, and you go home and, you're not, there's no great loss for you. So I think that we have to kind of put ourselves in the position of what's the best thing that could happen to us. And that potentially could change our life, right? I mean, I think this fear that can hold us back from creating those communities and, those new connections, that's something that I think we really have to get over, because to me, some of the relationships that I've even built more recently, like my late 30s, are some of the best relationships that I've had, and they've helped me to grow so much. So I think it's really about looking very much at the positive side of what are the best things that could happen to me if I was to go out to this event or go to this retreat or start this community. Like, think about how much you can grow as an individual from the new people that you meet. And I'll give another example, because I'm actually traveling this week for work, but on my way back, I'm in a route through Europe, and I put out just a call just to see if anybody that follows the Only Hearts, where people are based. And somebody came forward that was in London and said, please stay with me if you come through London. Like, I'd love to be able to meet you. Right. So, there's just, people are much more open and friendly than I think sometimes we give them credit for. And I'm all about, what are the possibilities? How could this change my life for the better? And I think when we look at it and we frame it that way, there is a lot of opportunity to create new bonds and to, I know that this sounds just crazy to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I really believe in it. Opportunities to change the world, to make the world a better place. I think that so much of that comes out of relationship building.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. And fear can hold us back, whether it's trying something new, meeting new people, going to a new event, and so many other things in our life. But when we listen to that and we let that guide our decisions, it doesn't lead us down a path that is really fulfilling and the life that we generally want. It's okay to listen to fear and, hear what it has to say and decide whether it is something that we do want to follow, because sometimes it's a useful thing to listen to. But a lot of the times when it comes to social events, nothing catastrophic is going to happen. So it's probably unwarranted to listen to that. So yeah, I love how you talk about that. I think that's so important because we're going to get so much more out of these than we are staying home and scrolling on our phones or interacting with these same communities online.
And can I also just add too, because as we're speaking about this, I'm thinking about, being a mom. It's like, what do we want to show our children, right? Do we want to show our kids that we stay home and we're hermits and do nothing and meet nobody new and don't take chances in life? Or do we want to show our kids the value of friends and community and having really strong relationships? I think for me, it's for sure the latter. And so I'm really trying to be the best example for my son as well, because I want him to see his mother and his parents being so out there and being social and having strong friendships and having people that we can count on and vice versa. I think we have to teach that to our kids. And the best way to teach that is by showing it to them as opposed to just talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different activities that we can bring them along to, right? There's women's circles and gatherings and different workshops that people can bring their babies and their kids to, and they can be part of that and they can learn that from watching you and literally doing it as well.
And I will add to that too, because you just brought up a really good point. The reason that Alex, even my son, even knows his best friend right now is because his mother and I did the same community baby music class together. And I'll give a this. I don't think I talked about this last time, but I will tell you about it this time because it's really relates back to what we're discussing right now. So we were in this community music class together. It was during COVID, and this woman was sitting there with her child who looked to be around my son's age. And I just loved her style. She came to every class and she just looked so cool. And I thought, this is someone I want to be friends with. Just something about her aura that kind of gave me very positive vibes. And I don't really use that term very often, but I will in this case. And, but I also felt like, I guess this is this idea of fear, right? I thought at the time, it feels weird to just go over to someone and introduce yourself based on the fact that you like how they dress. So I needed a bit of an in, right? So then one day I heard her, one of the classes, speaking about the fact that she is an urban planner. And I'm very interested in urban planning. And I was like, this is my in. This is my opportunity to go over and introduce myself. And I did. And that was, I want to say it was over 3 years ago now. And that one, it like very short introduction of, I'm really interested in urban planning. I'd love to know more about what you do. We exchanged numbers. And 3 years and a bit later, we are extremely close as friends. She's one of my dearest friends now, and our sons are best friends. And so that never, I mean, if we're talking about taking chances, right? And what does that do for your life? And how does that, how does that help you flourish as a person and continue to like grow? If I had never gone over to her to introduce myself, Alex would not have one of his best friend that he has today. And I wouldn't have one of my closest friends who is, I feel like I've known her for most of my life. So I think it's like all about what is the worst, what would have been the worst thing if she had shut me down and that would have been it, and instead I ended up with somebody who is extremely dear to me. We have to take chances in life. And I'm not just talking about in our relationships. I think it extends to all parts of our life. But if we're talking specifically about relationships and communities today, please take chances in that sense, because it only will help you grow as a person. And it's great for you. It's great for your kids to see it as well. It's just a really, really wonderful way to help expand your life and help you, grow in ways that you maybe didn't even think you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Take those chances and don't let fear or uncertainty hold you back because likely the outcome is going to be better than you expected. And if it isn't, it's not going to be that big a deal.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
useful skill in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a therapy that you learn as a psychologist, but I
Yeah.
don't necessarily use too often. But one useful, there's lots of useful parts of it, but one useful thing is asking when you are fearful about something, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? And what's the most likely? And it's very, very unlikely that the worst case scenario is going to happen. So this is something that people can use when they are wanting to approach that girl who dresses amazing in their uh, class, like their baby class, or any other situation. It's a useful thing to do to move past that fear.
Maybe I should have gone into therapy. Maybe that was my true calling. Especially as a cancer.
Yeah, you're using it naturally, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to run in-person gatherings, yes, we should just start. I absolutely agree, whether it's like creating community online or in person. But are there any tangible things that you think would be useful for listeners to know if they do want to start gathering mothers or women together? Like, what are some ways we can start? Maybe it's, do you have any ideas about like really simple ways to run groups rather than, we're not going to start by running like a week-long retreat, right? That's overwhelming. But where do we begin?
I mean, first, I think you have to have a captive audience. So that's an important part, right? I mean, obviously, it's like you don't want to be screaming out into the abyss if no one's going to be on the other end receiving your message. So I think starting to build the community or starting to even gauge who might be interested in becoming part of a community that you would want to create, right? You can start, as I mentioned before, really, really small. I mean, it could literally be a meeting in the park with a coffee if you wanted to. I did something that was a bit more planned just because I had the audience to be able to do it. And what I will tell you before, sorry, because you had mentioned it before, was, you know, in terms of yes, I have people here in Toronto because you had asked about was there a lot of interest in Toronto. But what I have discovered is that the majority of the community for the Only Hearts is now not in Toronto, right? It's really it's in the US, it's in Australia, it's in the UK, it's all over the world. My Toronto community is wonderful, but it's actually now the smallest community that I would say I have on a whole because it's much more global now. But my thinking around it is really, gauge the interest, I would say, see what people might be interested in. I've even asked around to see, like, are you interested in a jewelry workshop? Did you want to do pottery? Do you want to meet for dinner? And then kind of get a sense there too, because the reality as well is like thinking about people's budgets, it's if you're trying to make it as open to as many people as possible, then obviously something that would be a little bit more affordable, like getting a coffee and going to the park, would be the easiest thing to do for a lot of reasons. A lot less coordination in that way. But I guess it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? And your starting point. But I would say just reach out, see who's interested in what, and start small if you have to, and then you can build from there. But don't make it so that it's a stressful planning event for you. Unless you already have a captive audience and a captive community, I would say gauge interest in what people are looking for and then just go from there.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about the most recent gathering that you did?
Sure, yeah. So I did this pottery and brunch in Toronto's West End, and it was just really beautiful. It was intimate. I mean, there was 10 of us there. And it was just over, an afternoon on a Sunday. I wanted to make it very casual and just easy for people to come to. And it's funny because so actually I'll give you another example because, I feel like a lot of our conversation is kind of taking me to different points of how I started to like get this event planned. So I put it on the Only Hearts Club onto the Instagram. But I was like, I'm also part of this community group in my neighborhood in Toronto it's specific to mothers. So I'm also going to reach out to the community group that I have in my WhatsApp. And I did. And I got somebody who said that she was extremely interested. She said, but her little one was really young. And so she'd have to wait till they were a little older. And I said to her, oh, you don't have to worry because this is actually not an event for mothers and children. It's an event just for moms. And she was one of the first people to sign up for it. As soon as she heard that, she's like, done, I'm in. And so I got not just participation from the Instagram page, but also participation from one of my community groups as well. I think you also have to plant your seeds in different pots if you want to sort of see who's interested in helping you grow that community. So yeah, I reached out to a local pottery maker. She has this intimate studio in Toronto's West End. She is a young woman entrepreneur, which I love as well because I really like to support local, and I especially love to support women entrepreneurs. So she started the studio, I want to say 6 months ago, pretty recent. And I had actually gone to one of her events, her first Friday night wine and pottery event when she opened the studio back in the fall. And I knew at that point that one day I would want to do an event there. I just thought this is the perfect spot to do Only Hearts Club's first event because it's small and it's intimate. And that's what I want. And I'm also very much about, I think, good conversation is a really nice thing to have when you're planning these events. And when you have too many people, I mean, it's great because then you have people having different conversations. But I thought, what can we do so that everybody feels included? And that's exactly what happened during the event. It was small, it was intimate, it was casual, but it was so lovely. And, we ended up actually after the event ended, people said, can you please just create like a subgroup for us so that we can stay connected online? And I said, absolutely. So there's been back and forth with the subgroup. So I'm hoping that there may be, one or two friendships that blossom from that. But it was a really great start for me. And yeah, we'll see about, how I plan future events. I'd love to do a retreat or something. And I know that we've discussed that as well, as two women that are in a similar spaces. But I think this was a great jumping off point for me. And it was very much validation of the fact that those in-person connections, you just can't beat them. If you can make them, if you can make it happen, I mean, to me, that's such a great way to really build the foundation for some friendships.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other strategies that women can use for building adult friendships? You've mentioned a number of things throughout this conversation and examples from your own life and how you've made really good friends in your later 30s. How can women go about starting to foster and find new friends as adults?
I mean, I would say one of the best ways to do it is to just engage in activities that interest you, things that you are passionate about. And as much as you can do those things in person, I think that that's very beneficial as well. I really, I can't, um, diminish the importance of in-person connections. As much as I'm thrilled to be building an online community, my goal with this online community is to get people offline as much as possible, because again, I think, we've said it, I sound like a broken record, but to me, I think back to some of the friendships that I have from when I was younger, and those friendships didn't come out of being online. They came out of being out in the community, and years of getting together and having those in-person memories and those moments together that really help to like establish the foundation for like lifelong relationships and bonds. And even if I think back to what I was telling you before about this person that I connected with in my son's music class, that happened offline. Now, of course, we message each other every single day on WhatsApp. We're always online together. But we wouldn't be building that type of friendship if we were just doing it online. We have those connections. So I think getting out into your community is so important. And also, I would say that, you know, I had a thought and I forgot what it was, which happened to me last time too, because we're on a roll here and there's like lots of things to talk about. But yeah, I would say just really trying to make those connections. And also, I remember what I was going to say. Even with your kids, right? Use your kids as an opportunity to meet new people, because my son goes to daycare right now, and every day we go to his daycare to pick him up, and I've built connections with some of the mothers there. I'm not saying that that's going to happen with every parent that you run into, but it certainly is, I think, a really great way to meet new people in a very easy way, because it's right there for you. You don't have to go looking for it. And I'll give you another example. My husband took my son to a birthday party a couple months ago that it was only one parent that was able to go. So my husband went, and he ended up speaking to another parent there, and she was from my hometown. And her son had his birthday party a few weeks after that, and unfortunately we couldn't go. But I sent her an email and I said, "Thank you so much for the invitation. I heard that you're actually from my hometown. It would be lovely to meet you." And within 1 week, we had set up a play date for the kids, and we were meeting each other in person. So I think, again, I keep saying it over and over again, but it's because I really, really believe it. It's just start conversations with people. Some of those conversations will lead to nothing, and that's okay. I mean, that's bound to happen, right? You're not going to be friends with every person that you meet or that you have a conversation with. But some of those conversations might lead to something else, and that might lead to a new friendship. That might lead to a new community, because I'm going to give you another example, because I think these examples are really important to show that like these are real life examples. So the music class that my son was in, there was another mother there who was so lovely, and we ended up exchanging numbers, but we didn't really stay in touch after. And then a couple of years later, my son went to a new daycare, and who was there but that woman and her son? And so now we started to build that friendship. And she is a runner as well. She's actually run multiple marathons and half marathons. And when I told her that I was a runner, she's like, "There's a running group in the area for like other mothers too. I'm going to send you an invitation for that." So she did. And to be fair, I have not gone to one of those Friday morning runs, but I plan to. And so it's like, not only am I building a friendship with her, but she's bringing me into a community that she's a part of. So please, 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 make sure to just be open to having new conversations with new people, and you just never know what that's going to lead to.
Yeah, being open and putting yourself out there seems to be a theme with what you're saying. And I love all the examples that you're giving to show that in real life, because that's really helpful.
There's not much more, like, honestly, as like human nature is exactly what it is, right? Like there is no secret recipe, there's no secret sauce. It's literally just being open to smiling at somebody, saying hello, saying, "Oh, if you're at a daycare, which one is your child?" And then, starting the conversation that way. Like, there's nothing that is complicated here. As human beings, we are meant to be connected to each other. And I think somewhere along the way, and I think social media in some ways, as much as I'm a proponent for it, I think it's contributed to this disconnection, right? That's why the pandemic was such a huge thing as well, because beyond the fact that had to stay home, it meant that we weren't able to see the people that we loved and that we cared about. And I think we just cannot underestimate the importance of human connection. It is at the foundation of everything that we do. It factors into every area of our life. And It's not complicated. It's never been complicated. There was a time in history where phones didn't exist and social media didn't exist. Laptops didn't exist. Like technology was non-existent, and people had those connections, and they looked different than they do now because obviously the villages were much smaller. The villages are bigger now. But I think a lot of us sometimes lose that sense of community and that sense of connection because we are so individualistic, and our lives are much more individualistic than they used to be. We have to get out of that because there's even been so many studies that have shown that women who have strong relationships are much, are better with their physical and mental health. They're just healthier in general. So I think even acknowledging that and the importance of that for your own physical and mental well-being, that should be enough for us to get out of our homes, off the couches, and out into our community to be making those new connections.
Yeah, we can try to be healthy in so many ways, focus on our sleep, track what we eat, do all these things. But often people forget about the community and the connection part. And that is such a foundational part of our lives, but also our health.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, going back to social media, because it is a theme here as well. I was on my Instagram a few months ago, and I think that we might have discussed this before. And it actually might have been what kickstarted this conversation to begin with. I'm pretty sure it is what the reason we're having this conversation right now. But there was this woman who she posted a video in her car about the fact that she was in her 40s and she didn't have any friends. And I thought to myself, well, that, and just her husband and her kids, those were the only people that she's really spent any time with. And I thought to myself, that's really sad. I said, I feel like she must be the exception, because when I look around at all the friendships that I have and all the people that I can depend on and who can depend on me, I feel like I'm the norm and not the exception. And then I started to go through her comment section, and I was absolutely flabbergasted by the number of specifically women who said, "Oh, honey, I'm in the exact same position as you are. Don't worry. Like, I completely relate. Like, let's be friends with each other." And that's when I started to think, oh my gosh, like maybe I hope that this is not the case, but like maybe I'm not so much the rule. Maybe I am more the exception, or if I'm not the exception, there's probably a lot of people out there that are pretty lonely and that don't have those friendships that have taken them through the years. And I think if I'm not mistaken, that might have been what incentivized our conversation today to happen, because we both know how important it is to have those friendships.
Yeah, and I don't think, well, clearly she's not alone in that, no pun intended, but there are a lot of people who feel that way. And loneliness is an epidemic that we are going through, even though we are so connected and we can easily access people digitally. People are spending less and less time with people in real life. So some people may have friends and family, and they may not be quite as extreme where they have nobody outside of their nuclear family. But yeah, I think that you are more the exception to the rule. But I think you are because of the things that you're talking about here today that you're putting into practice. You're not just lucky and have friends that you can count on. You're doing a lot of things that are facilitating that and creating a community around you. And it's inspiring for anybody who isn't feeling that way and wants that. Like, we have the power to create that in our lives. It may feel overwhelming, it may feel daunting and hard, but we can take little steps, like smiling at strangers, like you recommended, or attending something in real life. There's things that we can do to start creating that around us. It doesn't have to stay that way if you are feeling completely lonely and like you have no friends.
Yeah. And I think that, authentic friendships where you're really putting yourself out there and you feel like you can be yourself with that person, and that, you're willing to give of yourself. I think that there's so few things in life that are as important and as rewarding as that.
Absolutely. So, is there anything here that we didn't talk about or that you would have liked me to ask that I didn't?
I mean, I think really what I'd love for to come out of this conversation, hopefully anyone that's listening, if this is, speaking to you, if this resonates at all, and if you go out there and you make one new friend, can you let us know? Because I really feel strongly about the fact that these conversations have to happen. I'm excited to, be here with you today to discuss this because I think that I don't know if the conversations are not happening enough, but like I just feel this is one of the things I'm most passionate about is building communities and ones that are authentic and kind and inclusive. And I would love to know if anybody is listening to this today and thinking, man, I just have to get out there and I want to put myself out there more and I want to make a new friend. If that happens, please come back and tell us because I would love to know that these conversations actually really do have value, and it's important to have that reminder and that encouragement that going out there and putting yourself out there is, can be a very rewarding experience. As scary as it is, I want to kind of leave on the reminder that please do not let your fear inhibit your ability to go out and build those connections because, you know, when you look back on your life, the friendships and the relationships that you build are going to be the most important thing. Nothing else. The material stuff, as wonderful as it was that, my now friend dressed well, and that's what initially, drew me towards her, that at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't matter. It's really about, having those people that you can rely on and making sure that you have built your village. It's so important because I think we've gotten away from this and, life is what it is right now. We're busy, there's more and more women that are in the workforce, building their careers, even in terms of, starting their families, as we discussed last time, starting your families later, the reality looks different now than it did a few generations ago. We don't have families in the same places anymore. It's a different landscape than what used to be. But please do not let that hold you back from making your own family, building your own village. It will take work. You're going to have to put time into it and effort and energy the way that friendships take to build them, but it's so worth it. And, make that in 2025, we're still somewhat at the beginning of the year, make that a priority in 2025 to really just go about building that village for yourself because you'll look back. And if you're listening to this right now, and this is, setting off a light bulb in your head in any way, hopefully you'll look back and say, I'm so glad that I listened to this conversation. And, I know what I have to do. And it's not complicated, but it does take effort.
Yeah, exactly. It's not complicated. We overcomplicate things. We don't need to do that here, but it does take effort. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for coming on here and having this conversation. I know it's an important one. Community is something that people in my community talk about a lot. And out of the podcast episodes, the ones about community and friendship tend to be the most popular ones. So I think they're popular for a reason.
I wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. We're all craving this. So before I let you go, can you just let us know where people can find your community?
Sure. Yeah. So my Instagram account, which is where I'm the most active, is The Only Hearts. And that is a pun on the Beatles, The Lonely Hearts Club, because I love them. And I was like, why not just make that into, sorry, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. I should give the full, I think, but it's The Only Hearts. And yeah, I'm active on there. And if anybody, comes and follows the account from this podcast, please let me know that you did. I'd love to hear from you, and my DMs are always open. And I'm always looking to make new connections, and I guess that's why I'm here right now with you.
Thank you very much.